Hey guys, so I kind of feel like I've been talking to myself on here for a while, but just now there seems to be this uptick in interest in the vertical plane. So here I am, I'm back from my sabbatical. Sometimes I'll get a hunch to cover something and then it ends up blowing up. Then my videos will retroactively get a lot of views. And it's usually after I've moved on to something else. Something about me is I'm a chronic non-finisher of books. I don't read as much as I should. So since so many people seem to be interested in this book, and I seem to be the only one that's going through it detail by detail, page by page, it seems like some of you want to hear more from me. So this is part 4 of the vertical plane. And for reference, for those of you that have the book, we are in chapter 12, page 84. Lucas announced that he was to go to Stopford. This was, as we guessed, Stockport. It seemed to us quite a journey. He left a very long message to Peter the same day. It was in reply to Peter's discoveries at Oxford and his request to know more of the men at the college at around the time Lucas said he was there. Peter was trying to test Lucas's knowledge. He carefully pointed out the lack of inscription above the fireplace in Brasenose, but he did not disclose where, in fact, the inscription was, nor what it said. I don't think he even told us. He hoped Lucas would offer the information, and he did. So this is a game of, like, cat and mouse. It's basically two guys. What it seems like is, like, two guys from different time periods trying to vet each other that this is real. And it's kind of hysterical. So the translation of what Lucas wrote in English, like in modern English. I must cover my shame. I made a mistake about the words above the fireplace. It is my poor memory. Yeah, right. He was trying to trick him. They try to trick each other all the time. It's fucking weird. Yeah, it's his poor memory. It's my poor memory. The words are above the first stairs. Anno Christi. Some date. Et Regis Henry C. Okay, I can't read Latin. I'll put it on the screen though, for those of you that can. Do you know any of these men? Roland Messenger, Richard Sherwood, John Smith with a Y, John Formby, Matthew Smith, Matthew, Ralph Bostock, Robert Holmes, Tom White, and Tom TIPPYNG. Lucas had coped very well with the inscription and in pulling out the right names for his fellow students. Lucas is like, here's the real deeds, and Peter is like, cool. Despite the computer being available, he only returned to it later in the week. We had a name now for this waiting around, ghost busting. It was jokey and deliberately so. Ghost busting was becoming the central evening activity. Messages weren't discovered anymore. They were allowed for, sometimes expected. So calling it ghost busting helped us keep the whole thing in perspective. I didn't believe in ghosts. If Lucas wasn't a sophisticated hoax, then he was real, a man out of time. It's more likely that this man is a time traveler than a ghost. That's how strongly he does not believe in ghosts. Okay, Ken. Up on the wooded skyline, the keep of Hawarden Castle showed clearly. There were no houses in view. The castle was on the ridge which carried the old road towards England. It was the way Lucas would follow. We were in the marshland of Lucas's time. Deep drainage ditches run along Manor Lane at the Sandycroft end, deeper than any near Dawdleston. If Lucas ever came to these places, I wondered if the view included these woods and the round keep of the castle. Perhaps it was a little more intact in those days before Cromwell's soldiers stole a stone or two. Okay, so this is from Lucas. I saw my learned friend concerning your time. He had many a word to say, although he thinks that I am sick. He advised me, well, he said that I must not tell a soul about this unknown world and about your people, else it is nothing less than a capital offense according to the crown. I immediately swore that you are honest, but it sometimes makes some people fearful, such as my servant. Also, he asks me not to write until he comes and sees the computer, so I shall speak with you 5 days from now. Your good friend, Lucas. Lucas in his original text, he calls this thing a commuter. So what must this computer look like to somebody from the 1800s? I can't, it's nothing I can even compare it to. It's something that is so far advanced in the future that people of that time, could they even conceptualize what it was or what it could do? I mean, he says that it's all done by speaking, so I don't fucking know. So outside the kitchen, they were doing a whole lot of renovations. They were digging, like, damn, like 40 tons of earth, broken bricks, tarmac, cobblestones. Basically, shit was just a mess. And we all know poltergeists love things moving around and changing. It's one of their favorite things. At the same time, the computer was switched on. It was often on despite the risk of dust damage. Inside the cottage, it felt like a transport cafe, all teapots and plates and newspapers on the floor. Debbie was looking at a cheap edition of A History of Chester. One incident caught her attention. This was a criminal case punished by pressing. Oh, God. In a press yard, a prisoner would be made to lie down on a wide wooden plank or door placed over him. Then he'd slowly be crushed with stones. His only consolation was the right to pass on his land to an heir rather than having it confiscated by the crown. I had come across it before in school and was the only one in the cottage who knew its other name. Pain fort et door. Apart, that is, from Lucas. The door to the kitchen had been open through our conversation. The screen had been blank, yet now it read, I heard you speak of the awful pain fort et door. Why is this? Do you mean to tell the crown? It seems like Lucas, seeing any type of words from his time, he's very interested in. He's very interested in Peter because he knows Peter knows his language. He wants to talk to the people who can understand him. So he recognizes like any kind of language that could be back then. You know, like, why are you guys talking about the pain fort et door? Do you mean to tell the crown? Like as if they're gonna go back in time and tell the king. His short message had two significant aspects. This means he can listen to our conversations. There had been no message from us to him, so like he's just responding to what they're saying. And the second thing is that they had a witness with them both. None of them could have physically written that message unnoticed by the others. Deb's other idea was that their thoughts had carried. So this is another interesting thought on poltergeist activity or paranormal stuff. Like when we talk about spirit boards or things like that, they say that it could be a collective conscious. Often, like when a group is working together, things will come up that relate to their personal lives, and so that is like one of the theories of why a spirit board works. So I think that's what Deb is trying to say, is that their thoughts are like visible, which is like actually really scary. Actually really scary. So he left Lucas a message of reassurance, being like, no, whatever, dude, we're not gonna bust you. Don't worry about it. Then an hour later, there's another message, and it was a poem. Oh, shit. Okay, so they're getting so comfortable. Like, Ken comes outside. His little friend Dave is, like, doing donuts in the Jaguar for some reason. And he's like, you got anything? And he's like, yeah, a poem. Looks like a goodie. You want to see it? And this guy's like, I'll look at it later. Just keeps doing donuts. I don't fucking know what he's doing. The Jaguar is a big deal in this. So they're all like getting cocky, like, I'll look at it later, no big deal. So like, anyway, the noise from the Jaguar doing donuts, they had missed that the power went out. There was a fucking outage. And so, no, you're not gonna look at that poem later because it's fucking gone and no one even read it. So you suck at ghost busting, Ken. So there was nothing to see when they go in. The poem was gone, and along with the fucking message that he wrote to Lucas. Ew, he goes, I tried to blame Debbie for not saving the information to disk and thereby protecting it. Why are you going to blame your girlfriend? Why don't you blame yourself, Ken? The power came back on at tea time and the music took up where it had left off. There was nothing there. If the information is not saved to disk, then it can only live in the BBC computer memory while there is power to the machine. Lucas didn't write again until his friend from Stopford arrived. Debbie asked him for the poem again, but the first sign of his presence was this rather confused item. There's a lot of letters, misspelled, strange characters, repeats, and the only thing that I can make out is commuter, this be, how, makes mine, leames, and John. Those are the only words that can be made out. Then Lucas introduced his friend, the friend, offered no names either, so that's funny. Like, it's actually signed a friend, which is really cute. They spell it in a really cute way. My good man, I have heard of your griffins, lions, and wondrous possessions, and it is too fantastic to understand your people are unnatural, although I have no dread. You are a phantasm of great powers. It is my theory that you are in the future, so you can tell when the king ends his reign and who is to take the crown. How do you cure the people of your time? Is the computer yours, pray? The fashion of our time is such that I will not give my own name nor Lucas's true description and name. I beg you forgive me for the delay, for I was uncolted, which means thrown from a horse, I guess, from Stockport in a hurry. Signed, a friend. Okay, so now they know Lucas is not his real name, and it's impossible for them to pursue their little historical inquiries, which is not good news to them because they just like to geek out and like try to verify everything, which I would be there for the experience. I would be like documenting the whole fucking thing. Like, there would be no question. Like, I want to be just like having people present and inviting the societies over. I would be like documenting this shit myself. Like, so the friend could evidently see the screen. He could read our message, but he could not see us. Lucas appeared to have quite a different access to our time via the screen, certainly, but he had apparently demonstrated that he could eavesdrop on conversations and see some items in the kitchen, although not beyond, and it is possible that he could write on the walls. Someone said that John could be an invention, another of Lucas's tests. If indeed this was Lucas's friend, then the puzzle deepened. The man from Stopford wanted hard information, some of it political. To me, it was schoolboy history, but as far as he was concerned, this knowledge might allow him to place his loyalties with due and careful regard. Obviously, why wouldn't you want to know the future? Dodoy! Mischievously, I did not want to tell him of Elizabeth's accession after Edward and Mary. He might confidently turn Catholic in 1554, only to be hauled up before the courts a mere 4 years later. I'm sorry, I don't get a lot of these things. I hope y'all get what I don't get. I just think it's like bricks. He writes like bricks. It's very boring. And that probably has been my excuse of why I haven't finished breaking down this book. But if I can read it once, I can do it, and I can break it down, and we can do this. All right. Yeah, so anyway, Ken's all just like, oh, I'm a phantasm of great powers. He's all like, how noble I felt. Black rats. He's talking about the Black Death. I couldn't see much progress if all we could say to one man was, redesign your towns, burn your flea-infested clothes, and get the cats to work. That's funny. Chapter 13. Okay, so the research liaison for the Society of Psychical Research, his name is John Stiles. Mr. John Stiles. So he's telling him about all this, the background, and then he moved on to the 3 theories. First one was the hoax. The usual culprits emerged, Debbie, myself on top of the list. Secondly, he thought that one of us might be causing it unconsciously. This is the thing I was talking about with the Ouija board, man. It's like when your thoughts are so strong and so loud that they can just be felt in like the nether realms. What am I doing with my hand here? I don't know. This was something which deserved serious consideration, although the apparent authenticity of Lucas's language militated against it somewhat. However, John Stiles didn't see much of interest in the language. This irked me, but he had only a snippet or two to go on, and it can seem quite inauthentic on casual inspection. Thirdly, he introduced the notion of mental interference with computers, although this usually resulted in nonsense or merely screen failure or equipment failure. There was, he said, only indirect evidence for it, but he gave no further clues. So there's a lot of things they could do to remove suspicion from themselves. The Society for Psychical Research was kind of, underfunded, but they promised to get them in touch with a suitable investigator. So they made progress during that so they could eliminate themselves. That's priority number one. Debbie finally got round to inviting her mother and brother down. The computer sat on the table by the refrigerator where a short greeting and message from us would be put on the screen. Normally, this was all there would be on the particular file we were using. The computer would be left alone. The door to the kitchen would be closed. If Deb was staying in the cottage, she would sit in front of the fire very quietly. Perhaps she would fall asleep. Anything from half an hour to a couple of hours later, she would open the door and check beneath the messages by scrolling the screen with the cursor keys. If the computer then made an infuriating beep, the file was not open beyond the particular page and line indicated. The next stage was to look for any new file names which might indicate a new communication. Lastly, the existing files would have to be checked for additions. Lucas had been known to use existing files and tag something on further down or indeed wherever. On this particular occasion, I left a message asking Lucas for some information on Thomas More. Then I went to Dave Lovell's house for the evening, deliberately keeping away. As I have said, the conditions weren't scientific, but I should like to quote from some notes made by Debbie's mother. My son and I arrived at Meadow College at approximately 7:45, blah, blah. A few minutes later, a friend of Mr. Webster's called at the front door for something. After a few words were exchanged between my daughter and the caller, he left. And we three, my daughter, Debbie, my son, and myself, went into the kitchen. We checked the windows and doors in the kitchen and bathroom. The back door was locked with a chain on the inside. The windows were closed, including the skylights, though we did not have time to check if they were locked. We then gave our attention to the computer. All previous entries on the disk were inspected. Debbie typed a few lines onto the screen, and as far as we knew, there was nothing entered after that. At 8:03 p.m., we went into the living room, closing the door to the kitchen behind us. I noted that the light had been left on inside the kitchen. We settled down, quietly reading or writing, occasionally speaking. I was not listening intently for noises. This was unnecessary as we were very quiet ourselves, but I did hear one or two noises which appeared to come from the kitchen, the sort of noise a mouse might make. I felt cold at times, and at one stage was shivering. We all kept our coats on as if there was no fire in the hearth. We went into the kitchen again at 9 p.m. Debbie left a weight on one of the keys to scroll the screen because she needed to go to the bathroom, and there did not appear to be anything entered in the file since we left it last. After a minute, we were startled by the high-pitched noise coming from the computer. This indicated to Debbie that something had been entered. She swiftly came to the computer, and we all saw a new entry displayed starting with a poem. We were short of time, and I was unable to understand all that was entered at the time, but we did manage to read and understand one or two lines. We then left the cottage. Here is the text of the message we received that evening. It contains the poem Lost on April 14th. So I will read the translation. Good night, good rest. Woe neither is my share. She bade good night that kept my rest away, and sent me to a cabin hung with care, to descent on the doubts of my decay. Farewell, she said, and come again tomorrow. Farewell, I could not, for I did sup with sorrow. Yet at parting she did sweetly smile, in scorn of friendship will not tell me whether it may be she delights to jest at my exile. It may be again to make me wander thither, wander the world for shadows like myself, who take the pain but cannot pluck the pelf. Thomas More was not unlike Erasmus, for he was a man of wisdom and had benevolence for any creature. He showed much concern for the church and did not keep his thoughts to himself, and for that reason was hanged by the crown for being a traitor and not acknowledging that the king is supreme over the church. He was an Oxford man who taught Greek and Latin and was a close friend of Erasmus, and together they learned with much haste many things which I cannot speak of. It would be best for your understanding that you read his Utopia or Erasmus' praise of folly, which More helped him write while living in More's house. When More died, Erasmus wept, for he knew no man is true. Lucas. So weird. So it's like a weird love poem and then a paragraph about Thomas More and Desiderius Erasmus. So Ken goes, "Hey Deb, it looks like Lucas is upset over some woman." And keep in mind they're talking about a spirit. Let me just role play. I'm gonna be Ken right now. "Debbie, it looks like Lucas is upset over some woman." Debbie, "Nothing to do with me." Ken, "You mentioned a few days ago when the power went off that you had a dream about Lucas." "It was nothing, just fantasy." "His words keep echoing your dreams, Deb. Won't you tell me?" "No, it's soft." It was a long time before she told me. Catherine was working on the small kneeling stool. She was oblivious to my presence entirely. Lucas strode into the room speaking words I could not understand. They were for Catherine's benefit. He stopped and saw me and greeted me. Catherine stood up. She looked very worried. Lucas turned to her and told her not to be afraid and that I was harmless, but she looked blankly at him. Then Lucas stiffened and his mood changed. I saw he was angry. He shouted something at Catherine and she ran to him. She seemed to be very frightened of him. I asked Lucas what he was saying, but he cut me short. He pushed me into the center of the room and asked me to pick up a knife from the table. To Lucas's and my own astonishment, my hand went straight through the whole table. Other than a prickly feeling in my right arm, I felt nothing. Lucas seemed to think it was a conspiracy and started losing his temper some more. He pushed Catherine into the center of the room to face me. She was very upset and confused. He seemed to be repeatedly shouting at her to look at me. She started to cry. She was very young. "Lucas, what are you trying to do? Please do not shout at Catherine," I pleaded. "There is nothing more uncomfortable than seeing someone cry." "Be still. Why do you not show?" Lucas asked me crossly. By this time, I was getting upset. Lucas shouted at Catherine once more and she ran out. I think I felt nothing but hatred. This ruined my image of Lucas as a kind and gentle man. He was a real bully. In my upset and temper, I said something that I can't remember what. Perhaps I was too upset to hear myself, but it really upset Lucas. He turned away to face the shelves. His arms were crossed. He gave out a little whine and just closed his eyes. I could not tell whether he was crying. I went to move closer, but without looking at me, he pointed to the chimney. He wanted me to go. I was so mixed up and so confused, but I still hated him. I walked to the chimney and found myself once again back half asleep near the cottage fire, waiting for messages or a distant sound of thunder. Wow, dude, that is some fucking dream, right? The following morning in Peter's ill-lit study in the schoolhouse, I handed him a printout of Lucas's message about Thomas More and gave him the news that we succeeded in obtaining Lucas's cooperation with a third party present. It was naive of me, but I was grinning with pride and pleasure. Peter shared my enthusiasm, but his joy at seeing the message was probably greater. Once more, I said nothing of Debbie's dreams. Deb. What's going on, Deb? In the 90s, they made this little documentary about this, and their way of portraying Deb's dreams is quite funny.
Hey, you can stay with Thomas. I have the new mattress, new blankets on my bed. Come, sit here with me, pretty Debbie. Don't be frightened. Be calm. Your perfume haunts my house. My hand is softer than any fair hand. You'd be unreal. Not only for your unnatural beauty, but also that you make me 400 years too old for you, man. One day, Debbie will know tolerances. Nothing but history. Way to live, knowing nothing else. Forgive me, Debbie. I am but foolish.
If I was to want to interview one person from this book, it would not be Ken. It would actually be Deb. It would totally be Deb. And here's what I believe. I think maybe a lot of this would not have happened if it wasn't for Deb. I think Deb was definitely a conduit, and she was definitely a sensitive of some sort. And because she could dream about him and had this connection with him, it made the activity stronger. Yeah, if I could interview anyone about this, it would definitely be Deb. And I should look into that. I should look into that, man. Yeah, she very much had a fondness for him. But then when this incident happened, she was like freaked out because he was seeing something, and he was with a woman or a girl or whatever. He was with someone that didn't see this thing, and he freaked out this girl so bad just because he's like, you don't see her? Look, like, look. And then at the same time, Deb can see him. So he's like, why don't you show yourself? You know what I mean? So he's pissed. I totally get that. But yeah, she does not have the same fondness for him anymore, which is, I guess that's good, because Ken being jealous of a ghost is kind of lame. Anyway, we're on chapter 14. I'm gonna close my book right now. I don't know if I'm gonna need to do this in smaller parts, or maybe just do it little by little, a little bit each day, and then have a weekly video. But I promise you guys, I will get back up on this. Thank you for all the attention. And if you enjoyed this, leave a like, comment, please subscribe, stick around.